Alrighty, guys. So welcome back from your weekend. I don't know what your weekend was like. Mine was, we'll say, interesting. Okay. And one of the things I did, just to tell you real quick, is I actually was talking to our good buddy Uncle Stan, and we were trying to see if there's any way he'd come back. And I don't know if that's going to happen yet. We're still starting to see. So maybe in these last few weeks, maybe it'll happen. But one thing he did help me with is seeing if I could get the same kind of hair that he has. So that's what I've been working on this weekend. I think it came out pretty good. So, you guys let me know what you think. But again, this is something I worked on this weekend. Everybody's got to have a hobby, right? So this was mine for the weekend, right? All right. So now, as far as the week that's coming up, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking a look at the causes of the Civil War. And in this lesson, because this is lesson number 1, so if you're looking for lesson 2 2 is really the only you're going to have ones for me, then you're in the wrong one. This is lesson 1. You should have already seen this. So this should be familiar to you. So you should pause and go, wait a minute, I've seen this before. This isn't the right one. But if you're looking for lesson number 1, you are in the right place. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at the causes of the Civil War, guys. We're going to take a look at it just so fast. Okay, this is something we normally spend a whole lot of time on, and we just don't have that kind of time. But that's okay, because I'm going to get you through it, okay? And so we're going to take a look at this in over 2 videos. So this is video number 1, okay? And then video number next is going to be, next. And so hopefully you've got your note sheet, just like almost every other video I've done for you guys. Those note sheets, you're going to fill in the blanks, whether you do it on the computer, you print it out, you write your notes, whatever it is. Again, guys, I don't need those notes. Just like all year long, I have not needed you to turn in your notes, right? You don't have to turn those into me. I know a lot of your other teachers are asking you to turn in your notes, and that's great, and that's what they're doing. But in my class, guys, I don't need you to turn in your notes. What I do need you to do is take your notes, and then take those notes that you've taken, right? You've written them down, you take the notes, and then you go over to the assessment for each and every lesson and video. So if you've watched the video and taken your notes, then the assessments should go pretty well for you. If you haven't, might be a little tough. And here's the other thing, guys. Quit trying to look these up on Google, because a whole bunch of you are giving me answers about, the women's movement of the 1960s and 70s. Guys, we don't study past like 1880. What are you doing? Tell me about the 20th century. Like, that's all well and good. I'm glad you know it, but that's not what we cover at all. Okay, so again, guys, watch the video, fill out the notes, do the assessment. That's how this works. That's how it's worked like the entire time we've been e-learning. Okay, so all right, now for today, hopefully you got your note sheet out. We're going to go through these. I'm going to pull up that PowerPoint for you. We're going to go through. You're going to look for those bold and underlined words, fill in the blanks, and we're going to be golden. All right, so let's see here. All right, let me get this pulled up where you guys can see it, because that'll be helpful and stuff for you, I'm sure. All right, so again, guys, causes of the Civil War. So basically what we're looking at is this thing called, it goes from compromise to crisis, okay? So we're going to look at a compromise, and we're going to end basically at the crisis, right on that precipice, right on the edge of the Civil War, okay? So, all right, so the big compromise we're going to take a look at here. Okay, guys, we've talked about compromises before, okay? So this is just the next one, and I've told you before about a lot of these compromises, they really just kick the can down the road. Like, they don't actually solve anything. In fact, truth be told, they actually make it worse. But that's okay. Not all compromises do that. Just the ones in like this situation. Yeah. All right. So compromise of 1850. So in 1850, there's this little place called California, right? All right. And so California is growing a lot, and it's a result of the Mexican Cession, actually. It's a whole big bunch of land, right? We talked about that Manifest Destiny. And so California is a part of that Mexican Cession. It's a part of that 500,000 square miles of current U.S. territory. Guys, if you don't have a concept of that, it's a lot. All right. And so the Mexican Cession, huge chunk of land, we talked about with Manifest Destiny, right? And so new states, they're going to be formed out of that, right? That only makes sense, right? And one of those new states is going to be California, okay? And I mentioned California because it's like important, because it's sort of like the first domino that falls in this whole scenario that just sort of accelerates the country towards civil war. Now, the question really becomes, would the new states be free or slave? Now, you would think, because you've been paying attention to my class, that the Missouri Compromise would have settled this issue, right? If it was north of the 3630, it's going to be free. It's going to be south. It can be slave, right? You would think, yeah, this is done. Well, great. One problem with that: California's in both. Right, it's both above it and below it. And well, times have changed, right? So it's been a few decades and times have changed and people are changing and they don't like that solution anymore because a lot of folks say, wait a minute, that's going to be a whole lot more free states. Not good. So, all right, now in March of 1850, so you'll remember that the huge gold rush in 1849, hence the 49ers, right? All these people come to California. And so their population explodes and they're like, hey, we got a bunch of people. We should become a state. Yeah, this is a great idea. And California already decided that they were going to be a territory that had banned slavery. So which means they would come in as a free state. And you'll remember from those awesome lessons that we did on the compromise and the balance of power that you get one free state, you got to have something else. You got to have a slave state. The problem is there's no slave state to come with California. So this creates a whole other problem. Big surprise, right? Like, ooh, okay. And so this is sort of what kicks off this big issue, sort of brings everything to a head. The stuff that they've been sort of been kicking down the road for like the last 30 years, all of a sudden now they actually have to deal with it. All right. And so this is how they did it, right? All right. So Compromise of 1850. It was orchestrated by the man by the name of Henry Clay. Now you've heard his name a bunch. That's because he's really active in this part of U.S. history, guys. It's kind of this thing. He's what's called the Great Compromiser. He does all these compromises. He's the one who tries to get people together. He's trying to keep the peace, to be perfectly honest, right? He's trying to get everybody a little bit of something of what they want. And really, that's what a compromise really is, guys. So a compromise is this idea that each side gets some things that they want, but they also have things that they have to give up or things that they give to the other side or whatever. It's a balance. You get some things you want, but you maybe give up on getting something else. And that's really what happens. Basically, you have two sides in this. So you have the northern side, which is you think of them as the anti-slavery group, and then you have the southern group, which is the pro-slavery group. And in the Compromise of 1850, both groups get something that they want or think of as a value, and both groups, they see something they really don't like in this compromise. And so, yeah, it's no one's really happy with it, right? So let's take a look. Let's take a look and see what the two sides got and what, how that worked for them. And you can start to think on yourself. Do you think that would have been worth what you got for what you gave up on the other side? All right. So, all right, on the northern anti-slavery side, all right, so the first thing they get is that California gets to come in as a free state. Okay, so this is actually a pretty big win for them, to be truthful about it, because it does upset that balance of power just a little bit, particularly in the Senate. Now, honestly, in the House of Representatives, the balance was already really askew because so much more of the population was in the North that they had upwards of twice as many representatives in the House. So the sort of, you would think it would be the anti-slavery group, already had a pretty significant amount of control in the Congress, you'd think. But it never really worked out that way for him. For whatever reason, it didn't. So the balance of power laid in the Senate. This is where the big push has always been. The other thing that the North anti-slavery group got was the buying and selling of slaves. What's known as the slave trade was outlawed in Washington, D.C. Now you'll notice this didn't outlaw slavery in D.C., but the slave trade itself. So this was a step forward for the abolitionist movement, the anti-slavery groups, all of those things. This was a step forward. And so these were the two things they got. All right. Now, remember, both sides get something of what they want. Now, let's take a look at what our Southern or pro-slavery folks got. Now, the pro-slavery or Southern group, first of all, they got this idea of what's called popular sovereignty. Now, popular sovereignty is this idea of the right of the residents to choose. Okay, so in other words, they were looking at it saying that, well, every new state now, they get to choose whether to be free or slave. In essence, this completely obliterates the Missouri Compromise, because now it says if there is a territory that's north of that 3630 line, no, they could be slave if they choose to be slave, right? And so it basically nullifies that entire compromise. And this was a win, a huge win, actually, for the pro-slavery group, because now, instead of being barred from all these territories way to the north and out west and all these other places, now they're open to possibility of being slave states and territories. All right. Now, in particular, specifically in this compromise, popular sovereignty was given to New Mexico and Utah, but it really just lays the foundation for popular sovereignty later on in Kansas and Nebraska, which we will talk about before the week is out. Okay. Now, the other thing they got was the tougher fugitive slave law. And honestly, a lot of folks in the South really believe that this was the bigger win over the popular sovereignty. Okay. And what the tougher fugitive slave laws meant that all citizens must help catch and turn in runaway slave. This made Northerners furious. Okay, now for those of you who don't remember, fugitive slave laws were basically that when you had a slave that would escape, the way the laws were basically set up was that if they were caught, they were to be sent back to the slave owner. Okay, well, the sort of push or the incentive even for those in the North to turn in slaves really wasn't that high until the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850 that went with the Compromise of 1850. And so essentially it said that everyone was to be turning in. Okay. And what this actually ends up happening too is it was so-called, what they were called free blacks. They could be accused of being runaways. They could be accused of being slaves. And as long as one person could testify to that before a judge, they could be sent not back to the South, but to the South as a slave. And so this was a terrible law, but it was great if you were pro-slavery. It was really great. And it really, what it did was it brought slavery onto the sort of doorsteps, if you will, of those in the North. You remember when we talked about sectionalism, that really slavery just wasn't a big deal to most Northerners. But between this and you had Uncle Tom's Cabin come along, and all these things really just start to bring slavery right smack dab in the face of Northerners. And so the abolition movement that we talked about last week starts to gain more and more steam. More and more people are behind it. And it starts to create this great divide between the North and the South. Whereas before, when we talked about sectionalism, yeah, they were different, but they were almost like, it just wasn't, slavery wasn't an issue, other issues, economic issues, all kinds of things. And so this is where sort of the tide really has started to turn by the time we get to 1850. Okay. Now, this eventually, though, will lead to what's called the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Now, this is in 1854. So this is just a mere 4 years later. Okay. So the Kansas-Nebraska Act, well, it really kind of has to do with railroads and getting a transcontinental railroad taken care of. And you'll see more about that later on in the week. But just understand that basically what it does is that it's the part of organizing Kansas and Nebraska territories. Now, it was put forward by Illinois Senator Stephen Douglas. Okay, now you may have heard of Stephen Douglas in the past. Really, honestly, the thing he's most famous for is the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Okay, now he actually defeated Abraham Lincoln in these were senatorial debates. A lot of people think that they had to do with the presidency, and they did not. They were actually senatorial elections for the U.S. Senate out of the state of Illinois. But he is the one who organized. He believed actually that if they were able to get a transcontinental railroad that went all over the United States, it would help unify the country. And it really wasn't such a bad idea. Problem was actually getting the railroad put together. And it just didn't happen in time, but that was the impetus for the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Now, to win the Southern support, he really focused on this whole dropping the Missouri Compromise ban on slavery, which is interesting that he's pushing on that. But realistically, I mean, just from a practical standpoint, it had been obliterated by the Compromise of 1850. Okay, but now he's really making it more of an illegal standing, and he's saying, hey, Southerners, man, you get behind this, and we're going to put this into law, right? It wasn't just a practical application where it was eliminated in the Compromise of 1850. Now we're going to like legally make it just like go away, okay? And the way he did that was through the concept of popular sovereignty. All right, now, the Kansas-Nebraska Act actually became law in May of 1854. It organized Kansas and Nebraska territories, and popular sovereignty was the way it was going to be decided in each territory. Now, on the one hand, you think, oh, this is a great idea, right? Like, let the people choose. It's a very American concept, okay? And you're right. On the surface, it's a great idea, right? Well, let the people decide, All right, well, the problem's going to be, and we'll actually see this in our next lesson, that it does lead to some problems because, well, it's kind of hard to know who was really actually living in Kansas, for example, who maybe had lived in Missouri like 2 days ago and all of a sudden was going to be voting on the Kansas Constitution, those kinds of things. And it becomes a big issue. And here's the other thing that happened. Northerners are outraged. They get so frustrated. They're so mad about this because they had this um, the Missouri Compromise, and they thought, okay, we've got that settled, right? So we've got this sort of this part of the country is protected from slavery. We've already got this done, it's settled, and now all of a sudden, that's gone, and Northerners become just incensed, angry. There's so much outrage in them. Abolition movement becomes more and more, in many ways, honestly, violent with the Kansas-Nebraska Act. And you'll see tomorrow's lesson or next lesson or however it is you're doing it, lesson number next, that we get to this thing called Bleeding Kansas. And some people even say actually that in this Bleeding Kansas time period is really when the Civil War itself begins. I don't know that I'd go that far, but an argument, definitely a really good argument can be made for that. Okay. All right, guys. So that's the first part of the causes of the Civil War. This is lesson number 1. All right. So just a moment here for some of you, because I know some of you do like boom, 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 boom. You're going to see lesson number next. Some of you, it may be 2 days. Either way, guys, there's going to be another video on this. So, but before you go on to that video, do make sure you go in, you take the assessment on this video, guys. Get your notes. If you miss anything, go back. This is the beauty of it being in a video, right? You can pause, you can slow it down. Some of you can speed it up. You can put closed caption on. You have so many options. Options galore. Okay. All right, guys. Well, listen, if you have any questions about this or something doesn't make sense or you think I'm talking like way too fast and even when you slow it down, it still doesn't make sense to you, definitely shoot me a message. Again, you've got Reminds. Many of you have got text, and you also, of course, you have EdSpeed, guys. Send me those messages. If you have problems with any of your assignments, questions on your grades, man, I am here for you. Guys, we are cruising along with this. We only have a few more weeks, right? And then we're done for the year, okay? And so, again, you guys have got to get those questions into me and see how I can help you. If you don't ask, I got no way of knowing. All right, guys, catch you later.